It just means we don't get any background noise. Okay, so welcome everybody to this meeting of the Rotary Club of Leicester. It's the 1st of March. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe. We have a couple of guests. Welcome to David Walker from the Rotary Club of Loughborough. Nice to have you on during your scatter week, where I think that's a very good idea, sending members of your club out to other clubs and joining their meetings. So thank you for choosing us. We also have Hule, Regina, our PhD student, also as a guest joining us today. Any other guests that I've missed? Nope. Okay, and do we have any greetings from other clubs?
I bring greetings from President Pat and the members of the Rotary Club of Loughborough, established as your daughter club 93 years ago.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, and any other greetings? Okay, thank you. I will just quickly mention a couple of things. As many of you may or may not know, Scott unfortunately had a positive COVID test, so he wasn't too well for a little while. He said to me his temperature hit 39.5 degrees, and he was sort of monitoring oxygen levels and this kind of thing. So I did speak to him today, and he said he's feeling better and he's on the mend. So that's good news. And he's on WhatsApp if you'd like to give him a shout. But he is doing better. Okay, and on the 15th of March, which will be exactly a year since we had our last meeting at the Grand, we're going to try something, and perhaps so the idea that we were discussing last week was perhaps we could kind of get it back into the flow of things. So if men could wear a tie, and for our female members and guests, smart dress that you'd usually wear for your Rotary meetings, kind of get us back in the mood again. And we should be back at the Grand very soon, I hope. So we are planning for that. So that's the 15th of March for the Smart Dress Day. I'm also happy to announce that the first shipments of food are arriving with our food banks from Morrison. They are delivering them. 2 of the food banks are receiving pallets of food tomorrow. That's the Xynthia Trust and Age UK. So just to kind of put some background into that, we've raised over £12,000 as a club for the purchase of food through the Rotary for Food Bank scheme. And we've nominated 5 food banks to benefit from that. And that the first few batches of food, which we're purchasing in batches of £550 per go, are now being delivered to the food banks. So that's wonderful news. And I've asked the food banks to send us photos or video of the first delivery taking place. So once I have those, we will share them with you. And just to kind of show you the good work we're able to do, even during these difficult times, we're able to kind of do what we can in the community. So I'll share those when I have them. Diana, if you could quickly share how you're getting on with the Outdoors Learning Sensory project. I was very pleased to see your progress being made on that.
Yeah, so just to update everyone who's now here then, so as you know that we're doing the multisensory garden with Netherhall School, and last week I coordinated with the senior school that's next door to Netherhall School, who are interested in doing, their children who are interested in doing the competition. So I've written up the competition as it stands, and once I've got the approval from the 2 companies who are involved in the project, who are essentially giving up their time and resources for free, then I'll send it to the school. I've also got another school, well, it's an after school activity type group, if that makes sense, who have also been in the involved with the young writer competition, and they're happy to come on board as well. But having said that, we said that we wanted to keep the competition, if that makes sense, fairly small anyway. But other than that, it seems all go, which is really good, because I was worried we wouldn't get the schools involved, because I've contacted Crown Hills and I still haven't heard back from them. So yeah, I was really pleased that the school next to Netherhall, I can't remember the name.
Oak,
yeah, something along those lines. So I was really pleased that they've said yes.
Yes, it was Hamilton School when I was growing up. On Keam Lane, for anybody who's wondering where the schools are. And so I guess the schools are very busy gearing up for next week, aren't they, at the moment?
I guess so.
With all the students coming back. So
yeah.
So that's very good news. Well done. And will there be any opportunities for Rotarians to come along and maybe lend a hand?
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. I mean, when we get to that stage, that would be definitely amazing to get people along to contribute in one way or another. And obviously, depending upon what the final design is, it'd be nice to have something to say that it was Rotary that helped to build the garden, not just the two companies. So we can get some nice publicity from it as well. And then, as I said earlier, then to get the two companies along to a Rotary meeting would be even better, to talk about themselves and why they decided to take part in the competition, apart from the fact that I may have twisted their arm.
That's great. Well done. So I'll keep everybody updated as I hear more from the schools and from Dan. So excellent. Do we have David Howard with us? We do, David. Oh yes, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Parmdeep, can I report that I attended the Rotary Club of Blaby Zoom meeting last week, and we had a lecture on the rescue operation for the white rhinos, which was very interesting, and I sent our greetings to them all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If David Howard could unmute just for a second. David, I just wanted to congratulate you. I saw the good news on your Sir Thomas White loan charity has donated £30,000 for laptops.
Yes, considering that was a 10-minute interview, it was about a half a minute of, they cut everything out about the charity and just, left the bit that I suppose that they wanted and they thought was relevant. So I was a bit disappointed. I'm told he called me Peter, but I don't remember that. But yes, it was. I'm hoping I'm going to have to duck out of this meeting because I'm chairing the Tommy White's one at just before 2 today. But I'm hoping we'll be able to do some more.
Excellent. That was my next question. If there was any more money going for other schools.
Well, I propose that we throw 100,000 at it at donations this year, which is more or less the surplus we made last year, because the charity is as big as it needs to be. So if we do make a surplus now, I want to persuade the trustees that we start making sensible grants round and about. I'm thinking we might support something like the Prince's Trust, which is definitely, they feed people into us. There's the Leicester startup community, which is encouraging small businesses to get going. But we'll have to see. I'm just one voice of 18, so if they don't like it, I think I'll do, excuse me, one more year as chairman, and then somebody else can carry the baggage.
No, but great. That's great creative thinking, isn't it? In these times, I mean, rather than just sort of sticking to the rigidly to the rules, to find a way to, because you've got a unique problem, haven't you? You've got so much money and not enough people to take it from you.
I don't know if it's unique. I mean, probably, I think Hugh Stevens has got a similar one in the Shipman Trust, but people say it's a nice problem to have, but it's not. I mean, if the charity commission decides that your charity is failing and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, we can't just keep accumulating money. And we do have it, but I'm in back now to extend the loans that we can make. But then nobody's actually got off their backs. But I think we need to do more. So, watch this space. Buying laptops is relatively easy. And I think I found one school with 190 kids who haven't got access to computers in Braunston. Wow. So there's plenty of deprived kids around.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Rotary.
No, excellent. Well done. Okay, Simon, I saw the good news on the golf AMAM taking place on the 23rd of June. How's that getting on?
Yes, I'll be sending out the actual invitations probably tomorrow now. So we will try and get things going. Hopefully we'll catch people who will be keen to get started again. So we'll see how far we get.
Is it okay to promote that to non-Rotarians as well?
Oh yes, yeah, I've got a very wide list of people who I've known over the last 10 years, and I keep trying to add to it as well. We've run these events about every second or third year over the last, oh, goodness knows how many years.
That's great. Excellent. Okay, do we have any notices from Secretary?
No, we don't.
Okay, that was quick. Any notices from any of the committee chairmen? No, none today. Okay, great. Sorry, was that somebody?
No, I said no.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. So yes, I'm pleased now to move on to our speaker, Lucinda Wessel, surgical matron of the Royal Free Hospital. She's going to be talking to us about reflections on nursing during the COVID pandemic. So please take it away. Lucinda, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Can I share on my screen? Can I just see if I can just, if I can just share.
Oh, you can now, yeah, great.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. And all happy with that, yes? So I'll just do this. Okay, ready for me to go? Okay. Well, firstly, I want to say a huge thank you to Leicester Rotary Club, President Parmdeep and Ed Cufflin for inviting me to talk to you today. It actually feels a real honour to be able to share my story with you. So thank you for inviting me to your meeting. I'm going to talk to you about my experience as a matron during the COVID pandemic. And this is the first time I've actually put down in words, in the written word, my reflections on last year. So I'm sort of thankful for that. It's been a very interesting thing to do. I've only a few slides, and they're actually photos that I snapped over the last year. And this is the first one, and it's of me in my uniform and my mask, which actually we became very masked people. I also just want to say that I understand that we've all had our own experiences and challenges over the last year. And I appreciate that there might be some of you listening might have had some difficult times. So I just want to acknowledge that with you. So who am I? Well, I've been a nurse now for 35 years. I trained in the North London School of Nursing, and I'm very happy at my hospital. And I've worked in a variety of roles since qualifying, including being part of its growth and development, and finally with merger with the Royal Free Hospital. I've now been surgical matron for 9 years. I lead and support 4 surgical wards, as well as line manage 2 clinical nurse specialists. Barnet Hospital has always been really welcoming, friendly, supportive hospital, and with a real sense of community. And that has proved to be essential over the past year, and really demonstrates the reasons why I really do enjoy working for the NHS and our hospital. So how did it all start? Well, in February, early March 2020, I remember colleagues talking about the awful situation in Italy, with their hospitals becoming overwhelmed and filling up with COVID patients, resulting in high numbers of deaths. But it wasn't just the patients who were affected, it was staff as well. And we could literally feel the fear of anticipation in the whispers of the corridor in the hospital. What would happen to us? It felt like the start of a tsunami. I then remember the first suspected COVID patients, the first suspected COVID patient on one of my wards. The anxiety of the staff was palpable. The nurses are professional and understand their duty of care, but they also suddenly felt very vulnerable. And this vulnerability became a theme throughout the last year. As it happened, this patient wasn't COVID positive, but it did raise all sorts of emotions and feelings of what was to become. And I knew I had to think about my strategy of how to support staff, keep patients safe, and how I was going to cope. In mid-March, the first ward in the hospital was to become totally COVID due to the numbers of patients who were not able to breathe, who had to be admitted and who needed additional oxygen support. I was part of the team that prepared that ward. This included personal protective equipment, which we all now know as PPE, and nurses, doctors and other healthcare professionals have always worn PPE, but this was to a different level. This was full hoods with visors, fit tested masks, long sleeve gowns, second person to assist with the removal of the PPE in a designated tape zone just outside the doors of the bays. And each bay of 6 patients' doors was closed and kept shut with warning signs on the door. Equipment had to be cleaned according to a fastidious speculation. There was limited access to the ward, and the sense of vulnerability, anxiety, yet bravery was visible. It was eerily calm and quiet, but we all knew something momentous was on the way. I wasn't on a film set, it was real. I was the matron the following Sunday shift, supporting and looking after all the wards in the hospital. There had been a weekend matron rota to provide support and clinical leadership in place for several years, and I'd worked many, many weekend shifts, but this was now, the next Sunday was my next shift. And my levels of anxiety really, really increased, and I didn't sleep the night before. My questions were, what would I be dealing with? How could I cope? Would I provide enough support for the staff and patients? The shift became increasingly busy with the added time of donning and doffing all the PPE. Patients were all in closed bays and had oxygen masks on, trying their hardest to breathe. And it filled me with sadness looking into those bays from outside, with looking at them. And I witnessed nurses being kind and compassionate despite their own experiences. And I realized then that what the staff needed was visible senior support who would listen, acknowledge, and be proactive. And this I could offer. This was in my ability to do, and this would become my key role. In the early days of caring for COVID patients at the start of April, key relatives were allowed on the ward to visit their loved ones. It was not yet mandatory for them to wear masks when not at the patient's bedside. And this is when I'm very sure I contracted COVID myself. In June, I tested positive for COVID antibodies and was able to work out that it was probably when, back in early April, a distressed relative coughed in my face. He most likely had COVID because looking back, he had all the symptoms. After this, I felt like it was a tense wait to see what would happen to me. And it will never be proven, as in the early days, there was no staff testing and I was asymptomatic. I just had slightly aching lungs for about 3 weeks, but I put that down to stress and working really hard. But I'm thinking that's when it was. Very quickly, it became clear that there were no visitors allowed in the hospital due to the very high risks of transmission. And I look back now and realise how little we understood about the disease in these early days, including the value and benefits of strict PPE, social distancing and incessant hand washing. Security was placed at the only open entrance of the hospital and staff ID had to be shown to enter the building. This continues to this day. And I think back to when anyone could walk into the hospital, creating a constant buzz of activity, as opposed to the unnaturally quiet public areas in such a public building. And this was an example of one day I just thought, gosh, this is quiet. So I snapped a picture. The no visitor rule was and is still one of the hardest parts, actually. I think for all of us as healthcare professionals, and certainly for the families, it's really hard. It's a time when you're separated from your loved ones at a most crucial time. And we've never experienced a no visitor rule before. But what it did do, it very quickly, there was a rally round led by one of the doctors asking staff and local communities to add, to donate old iPads and smartphones so that the staff could assist patients to keep in contact via FaceTime. The response, honestly, it was phenomenal. And we were able to ease the anxiety for the relatives and patients. But there were times when this was really heart-wrenching for staff, for doctors and nurses, and there were times when I saw them crying behind their masks. Within weeks of the pandemic escalating, a COVID HQ was set up. A team of staff were assembled and located in the large operations centre at the main entrance. The need for this was huge because it was hugely due to the awe-inspiring response from the public. Local pizza shops were sending in huge supplies daily. They were turning up on mopeds, delivering pizzas. One local lady made hundreds of lavender bags with a beautiful message about the lavender to help the staff sleep. Children sent in rabbit-shaped cookies and bakeries delivered cupcakes with a rainbow message, thank you. Toiletries for patients and lip balm and hand cream for staff flowed through the doors. A cruel symptom of the healthcare worker at the time was sore hands. My hands were red raw and some nights were bleeding after such frequent hand washing. A local business crafted visors on a 3D printer and sent in supplies. The joy and appreciation shown by the public, it seriously still blows me away to this day, and all my colleagues too. And the spirit in the hospital was one of community and fighting the good fight and pride to work for the NHS in caring for all the very sick patients who came through the door. Our wonderful charity paid for 1 meal a day in our canteen for all staff, and the staff car parking fee was suspended. That went down really well. All these acts of appreciation by the hospital board were helping the fearful, vulnerable staff get through each shift. The NHS Thursday night clap started and my neighbours were always outside, but I made sure that passing bus drivers were also shown a clap of appreciation. And on the last Thursday night clap, my amazing neighbours, unbeknown to me, had clubbed together and bought me an M&S hamper with a rainbow thank you leaflet with all their names on it. And it was really quite humbling, very humbling. I didn't really even know that they knew what I did, certainly the ones further down the road. So eventually every ward in the hospital became a COVID ward, and every member of staff was caring for COVID patients. The fear and vulnerability seeped through the hospital as each ward turned COVID. A new set of staff who were scared. I would assemble the staff and talk them through the process of what was going to happen. They had huge concerns about PPE and personal safety. Staff cried, some were angry. We became faceless carers, faces covered by masks hiding our emotions. My role was to remain visible and don PPE with the staff and look after patients. All other aspects of my role were on hold. I told myself I wasn't afraid. I applied all the principles of protecting myself and just got on with it. But it was difficult watching patients who were so ill, not knowing if they were going to make it. There was a gentleman I spoke to every day. He was on high flow oxygen mask, sitting bolt upright to enable him to breathe as much oxygen as he could. He asked me if he was going to survive, just like his wife, who'd rung me almost daily to see how he was. I didn't know the answer. I just tried to give him some dignity and reassurance that we would look after him and care for him. He didn't survive. He died shortly afterwards of COVID, and we had to tell his wife. And this is never an easy thing to do. But during COVID, this is exceptionally difficult as it was unexpected and sudden. Families were not with loved ones at the end of life, as this would put them at such risk. But I'm really pleased to say that now families can be with patients at the end of life, and also patients who have dementia and essentially need their carer, who might be their relative, to come and support them as well. There were 5 other patients in the bay who were also in the same precarious position, and I don't know what happened to them. It left me feeling emotionally drained, exhausted and anxious about what was going to happen. My family said I was quiet, pale and weary during this time. But there were moments of pure joy when patients who had been in hospital or intensive care for weeks went home. And the corridors, as you can see here, were lined with staff clapping. And that was to clap the patient out of the hospital onto their journey home to their loved ones. And it was so uplifting, and it gave us great hope and brought tears of happiness and smiles underneath the masked faces. And in this picture, you can just see the silhouette of our chief nurse who was clapping with us. She's in the doorway there. So how did I cope? Well, I never spoke about it when I got home. I really felt it wasn't fair on my family. They didn't need to know. And what happened at work stayed at work. But the little things that made a difference were my early morning walk in the park with my dog, very peaceful and tranquil, very lovely. My morning phone call with my sister as I went to work, that was a huge tonic. My daily limerick written by my mum, plotting the many events of the COVID pandemic. She did 100 days in total. They were fun and informative lyrics, which she's now put into a booklet, which really plots the story of what happened last year. And I've encouraged her to share that more. My children always asked me how I was. My dad was a rock at the end of the phone. But for my children, they were also going through their own struggles, as they were supposed to be doing their A-levels and GCSEs, which I'm sure many of your families and relatives were as well. During April, the weather became sunny and warm, and being at home was a break. But I actually always had this nagging feeling of what was going to happen, what was going on in the hospital, and maybe even a little bit of guilt that I wasn't there at work. May the 12th is every year International Nurses and Midwives Day. And in 2020, just by coincidence, was Year of the Nurse and the Midwife. Normally there'd be celebration events in the corridors with stalls promoting work, initiatives that nurses were doing, free massages, fun photo booths, quite a hive of activity of celebrating being a nurse. And of course, none of this could happen. So instead, the Director of Nursing launched a drawing competition for the nurses' children and their families. And the title is, "What does it mean to have a family member who is a nurse or a midwife?" And the response was wonderful. And all the drawings were put up in the corridors. And really, for me, it was a reminder that behind each colleague, there was also another world that they belonged to, that they also had families, and that we were all part of something that we were sharing together. And it just made me feel like that we are just all a little bit more, we're all human. Project Wingman became a welcome rest place in the hospital canteen. Don't know if you heard anything about that. It was in the press and the news. Airline pilots and cabin crew opened up a cafe in quite a few hospitals, and we had them here with us as well. They opened up a cafe and a place of rest with free magazines, tea and coffee in our canteen. And what I learned was that the NHS and airline business are actually quite similar. They obviously have the obvious huge safety elements, but that we were also professionals dealing with humans, dealing with human emotions of fear, anxiety, but also joy, because we both have sort of good outcomes, people with good outcomes on the main as well. So it was a pleasure to have them in the hospital. And I think for them, they weren't flying at the time, and they saw another side of life as well. So the first COVID wave declined last summer, and the hospital felt like it was slightly going back to business as usual. All staff continued to wear masks, and it felt a little bit of respite. A new 35-bedded ward was built on the grounds in the hospital in preparation for any future COVID surge. And how amazing and magic was that something like that could happen over 3 months. Yet in non-COVID times, a bit additional bed space would take significantly longer, if ever. So we were delighted, and here is a picture of it. The second surge did come, and Rainbow Ward was born, and has been used for patients for the purpose it was built for. And hopefully longer term, it will give us more capacity for our hospital. We understand the disease better the second time round. We had plans in place. We knew what to expect. Science had progressed, and so had the staff confidence. It was still exceptionally tough, with a higher amount of staff off sick with COVID this time, and we're interestingly trying to look at why that was. But it did reduce staffing levels on the ward, and this became a huge challenge, including risk of burnout for the staff who were still at work and who had been working throughout this whole time. But the hospital teams really pulled together, and we had twice daily staffing reviews, which required redeployment of staff across the hospital to ensure minimum safety levels. And it's hard and disruptive for nurses to be moved to other wards at the last minute. They don't always find it easy, but on the whole, they were happy to move. They were resilient, caring and understanding, and supported each other to keep our patients safe, while so many of them had been off sick or were sick themselves. As COVID admissions increased again on the second wave, there was a decision to swap 2 wards, a bigger bed-based children's ward, which had more side rooms, to swap with a smaller bed-based adult ward, if you understand that. It was to give more beds to adult capacity with more side rooms. And one of those wards was mine, the adult ward. And it was to provide greater capacity. And it was like moving house in a house swap, packing up absolutely everything and transferring the patients and all the supplies and equipment within an afternoon. It was literally a decision made, we have to do this. So we did this incredible sort of military without any plans operation, because we couldn't use children's equipment for adults. So everything had to be swapped. We then had to reverse it again several weeks later when the numbers reduced. So both very stressful afternoons that rapidly turned into late nights. But as hospital teams, we had to be responsive to the needs at the time. We did it, and we provided the capacity that was required. December the 1st came. Home self-testing kits, known as lateral flow kits, were introduced for every patient-facing staff member in the hospital. And this helped staff to become more confident, a bit more in control. They could establish for the families as well what sort of situation they were in. Interestingly, it did pick up some asymptomatic some asymptomatic staff who were positive. So it did prove to be a very useful tool in protecting everyone around us. The vaccine was then rolled out in January. I had mine on January the 5th. There were queues of staff for the vaccine, as you can see there. That's one of the corridors. There were staff who were reluctant, but they need care, and there was lots of care and support and discussion to support them to do that. We're about to start our second phase to vaccinate us with the second vaccine. So that starts in about 2 weeks' time. I will just do a public announcement at this point in time that if you're offered the vaccine, I really urge everyone to take it. It is of huge value. The staff in the hospital can see that and the difference it would make because of the pressure that they've been under. GPs and vaccination teams are there to talk to if you have any concerns. The other interesting thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if you have too, is I don't know a single person that has had a cold or flu. Sorry if you have, but I haven't, and it's really interesting because what has had that impact of mask wearing, hand washing, working from home, etc., a long list of things has had, and how is COVID going to shape our future? So there will be lots of things, and it's interesting to think about. So the last day I was at work, there were 35 patients with COVID in our hospital, as opposed to 260 in January this year. There are less staff sick, and there is a greater feeling of hope. That sense of the welcoming, friendly and supportive hospital continues and has proven itself. And what have I learned? I've learned the value of acknowledgement and recognition and appreciation, the power of teamwork, the endeavour of the human spirit. And I just want to show you on my last slide what I look like without my mask outside the hospital that I love. So thank you very much for listening to my story, which has been a really helpful one for me to tell, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's very nice. And it's just really nice to hear from somebody right in the thick of it. I mean, it's not something I don't know anybody, well, not many people who work in the NHS. We've got people like Richard with us in the club, but it's just really nice to see that insider's perspective. So I'm just going to, if you don't mind, cancelling your presentation, and I can.
Yeah, sure.
Any questions. So if you have a question, please go ahead and unmute yourself or put your hand up so I can see you. Yes, Richard.
Well, it was a lovely presentation, Lucinda. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm just interested to know when you envisage Barnet getting back towards some semblance of, or what plans are in place to start treating those patients who have fallen by the wayside during the course of last year.
Of course, of course. Well, there have been plans. It's being planned for quite some time. So probably last summer, it was very much okay, regardless of next surge, and no one knew what was going to happen. And we still don't fully, but regardless of that, there were plans already last summer. So we have sister sites. So as in, there's more than just Barnet Hospital. So we have Chase Farm, which is considered a non-COVID site. So there is surgery now happening there. So Barnet has an A&E, so anyone can walk through our door. So we have a very, our operations board and everyone, they have very clear plans on how to manage COVID and non-COVID patients. And the aim is that if patients come through our doors in A&E and they need coming into hospital, we admit them, but it's how we do it safely. All the other sort of cancer treatments and such like, we've really tried to keep going, but in perhaps different settings, because we do have other sites as part of the trust. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I'm aware that you're, unlike in Leicester, where we have 3 hospitals all work together, you are spread across several sites in North London each day. Yes, we are. But I mean, I don't know how Leicester has worked at all, but we've tried to use the different sites for different things. I think to our advantage, Chase Farm in Enfield doesn't have an A&E, so you can clearly be very clear about who walks through those doors. So that has probably made a difference.
Any other questions? Yes, David.
Just reading in the paper that the number of intensive care beds in this country is a lot lower than it is in Germany and America, something like a quarter, I think. Was there such a great demand on intensive care beds in your area that
Yes.
really done with more, and do you think that will change?
Yes, there was a huge demand actually, and actually there was extra capacity opened with sort of ventilators and such like. So we did have to open extra capacity, and that was on the first surge as well as this surge as well. It's reducing now. So we are going back. The numbers of our patients that are in ITU are reducing hugely. So that's really good news. It does feel different this time, I have to say. So that's, we understand and know so much more, and the vaccine, and I presume this current lockdown have made a huge difference, but the vaccine, I think, is the numbers of patients coming through our front door are less, significantly less.
Thank you, Lucinda, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, and I'm now going to pass over to Babs Marson to give voter thanks.
Thanks very much, Parmdeep. Lucinda, I think that was just the most fascinating and interesting insight when you think you're one hospital,
Yes.
and this has rolled out across thousands and thousands of hospitals around the world, not just in this country. And I think we have a huge debt of gratitude to everybody in the NHS. I have a profoundly disabled daughter, so I have had to shield her for 12 months.
Yes.
And it has been stressful. It's been really hard, but we are now all vaccinated. And can I echo your sentiments? Get vaccinated.
Yes.
It is one thing that will get us out of this. And if you have to be done every 6 months, so be it, whatever's
Yes.
needed. So thank you once again on behalf of all the Rotarians present, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Okay, attendance today has been 27, I believe. Just before I finish up, if Richard would be okay with giving us a quick update on the situation in Leicester hospitals.
Yeah, thanks, Parmdeep. I'd like to say that we were in the same position at Barnet, but sadly we're not. The numbers in hospital are falling, but we're still many times as many as they've got in Barnet, and sadly still quite a few people succumbing. But I think it's just, we do seem to be just taking, we just don't seem to have managed quite so well in Leicester right the way through this. We've been on permanent lockdown, and we've been permanently, well, actually apart from the summer, it does seem to have been fairly high through the winter, but we'll get there eventually.
Okay, thank you, Richard. If everybody could just go ahead and unmute themselves so we can say goodbye. Next meeting is going to be a fellowship and committee meeting, so there won't be a speaker next week. And it's, as always, great to see you all. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. This meeting stands adjourned. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.